It is the argument.
Yeah.
And it's been discussed ad nauseum. And
why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?
The way mathematicians react to that is that they say perhaps we're asking the wrong question. So I propose another question, equally difficult. The way mathematicians react to that is that they say perhaps we're asking the wrong question. And I think I found that helpful in the following way, and I'll be brief. It's this, that what faces everybody is a mixed picture. I call it beauty and bombs. In other words, we look at the world, we see some beautiful things and we see some horrible things, especially these days. And any worldview has got to take that into account. That is a fact. And we can argue as long as we like about the theoretical side, if God is good and all-powerful, why this and why that, why the other? And we never come to a satisfactory answer. So I propose another question, equally difficult, but I think it gets us a bit further. Granted that it's like that, is there any evidence anywhere that there is a God who understands it, and to such an extent that I can feel, not that I've got an answer, but that I can see there's a possibility of coming to some peace about it? And my answer to that is that, yes, I think there is. And it's the fact that the God presented in the Christian Gospels is a God who in that sense has suffered, because the central claim of Christianity is that God became human and that Christ is God. So, crudely put, what is God doing on a cross? Well, one thing it certainly shows me is that God has not remained distant from human suffering, but has become part of it. I think about this a lot because I find it's the hardest question for any of us. There's no two ways about it. And if you want a short response, it'll have to be short. My approach to it is, first of all, it seems to me atheism doesn't solve it. It solves it in an intellectual sense, that people say, like Dawkins, the universe is just like you'd expect it to be, when at bottom there's no good, no evil, no justice, and we just have to face it. Well, if that is correct, of course, it means you've solved the problem. You've removed it in some sense, but what you haven't removed is the suffering and the pain. So I find that philosophically a disaster.
Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I'd say.
And you think you're going to get in on that?
No, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms. They're wrong. The God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever.
Here's what Professor Lennox says.
I must be honest, I'm not impressed with that kind of reaction, because he's leaving out how much good there is in the world and how much good he himself has taken out of the world. And he might have to thank God for that.
All right, let's get into it. There's so much good in this world, right? And you'd think that would be the easiest thing to see, but it's actually one of the things we forget the most. And here's the kicker. We tend to forget the good the most when life's going really well for us. I mean, think about it. People often trace the whole problem of evil back to the Lisbon earthquake in the 17th century, and Voltaire, he just rages against the heavens over this cosmic injustice. Pretty intense, but here's the thing. The problem of evil as we know it is only about 350 years old. It's closely tied to two big things: the birth of a post-Christian world and the rise of massive wealth in the West. In fact, the places that are the wealthiest, the most comfortable, post-Christian, affluent societies are the places that have the biggest problem with evil, and also the places where people forget the good around them the most. Isn't that curious? Because think about it. In order to even have a problem with evil, you have to have some idea of what's good. Evil is basically what's fallen away from goodness. You know, we expected life, but we got death. We expected health, but we got disease. We expected riches, but we got poverty. It's like this fullness that's been corrupted, twisted, and broken. It's a fallen state, but from a pretty great height. So, we should definitely have a problem with evil, but here's the trick. We also need to recognize the good. And this is what blows my mind. The wealthiest societies, the ones that have seen more good than any other group of people ever has, are the ones most blind to it. Take, for example, the Atheist bus campaign in Melbourne that was modeled after the 2009 London campaign. Richard Dawkins' campaign in London said, "There probably is no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life." Simple, right? But in Melbourne, they took it up a notch. If God exists, he'd better have a very good excuse. And the quote, Woody Allen. Yeah, that Woody Allen. Rich, powerful, artistically fulfilled, and famous. And yet, here he is saying that if there is a God, he better have a really good excuse for him. But here's the kicker. Why do we think God should have an excuse for us? What's going on there? Now picture this. That same Melbourne bus rolling past cafes, people sipping their flat whites and seeing that slogan, God better have a good excuse. They'd probably nod in agreement. Yeah, God better have a good excuse. But imagine that same bus driving through a slum in Rio de Janeiro or the slums in Kibera, Kenya, or pretty much anywhere outside the comfortable, affluent West. Do you think people there would feel the same way? Number. They wouldn't get it. It's those of us in the richest, most privileged parts of the world, one of the ones who've been blessed with more good than anyone else in history, that seem to forget that good the most. Sure, there's bombs in this world. Absolutely, that's real. But there's also beauty. There's crooked lines, but there are also straight ones, and we need to remember that. Let's shift gears here and look at Alex O'Connor's view of reality. About 5 years ago, Mike Jones from Inspiring Philosophy had a debate with Alex, who was going by the name Cosmic Skeptic at the time. They were talking about the Amazon rainforest, and Mike made the point that even though the ecosystem involves all kinds of brutality, there's still inherent worth in it. Yeah, the Amazon is brutal, but isn't there something about it that makes it worth keeping around? It's beautiful, even with all its brutality. But Alex, he wasn't having it. He didn't want the rainforest to exist if it involves suffering, because suffering in his mind is just a net negative. And according to his utilitarianism, we've got to maximize pleasure and minimize suffering. If the Amazon brings more suffering than joy, then it's got to go. It's all about that utilitarian calculation. Does the good outweigh the bad? It's an interesting perspective, but it really makes you think about how we measure the value of life, doesn't it? And at the end of the day, we've got to ask ourselves, how much beauty, goodness, and complexity are we missing when we look at life through just a utilitarian lens?
The reason why I think it's worth keeping the rainforest is because if we get rid of the rainforest, it will cause ecological disaster that will cause more animals to suffer than if we kept it. If that weren't the case, if it were really the case that if we just tore down the rainforest, it wouldn't produce more evil, wouldn't produce more suffering, more ecological disaster, but the only downside was that we wouldn't have something like the aesthetic beauty of the forest, then I would be on the first plane over there chopping it down with an axe. I wouldn't allow the rainforest to stay up because of its aesthetic beauty if it meant that billions of human beings were dying and suffering as a result. And so I'm certainly not going to allow a rainforest to stay up just for the sake of its aesthetic beauty because a bunch of animals are dying as a result. I absolutely don't think that it has any intrinsic worth outside of the effect that it has on suffering, except for maybe a minimal worth with things like aesthetic beauty, which are nowhere near as important as the suffering that it's inflicting. And besides, I've never seen the rainforest in person, and so kind of I doubt how much the aesthetic beauty of the rainforest or something like that actually should play into a consideration.
Like that, Alex boils everything down to utility. Does it bring more pleasure or pain? He flips the script by asking, What if you walk into a forest and see a deer? What happens next? He's challenging the Christian view of suffering in nature, asking if that suffering is justified as part of God's plan. From Alex's utilitarian perspective, even a deer's suffering should be judged by whether it causes more harm or good. It's a tough question, but one worth wrestling with. Let's see how Alex tackles it when he debates someone like William Lightyear.
Leg trapped under a branch on its own. No moral free choice, no moral soul development, no people looking at this with a chance to save them, giving them an ability to achieve some higher order good. Just starvation for, say, I don't know, a week before finally being stumbled upon by a mountain lion who will kill it by sticking its jaws in its throat, and it will die excruciatingly over the course of a few minutes. This kind of thing happens routinely throughout the animal kingdom. I've said that if I gave you the opportunity right now, if I said that you were about to become a random wild animal somewhere in the world right now, when I press this button, I think you would kill yourself before I had the opportunity, because you know that you're about to enter a life of untold misery. The question is, why? Why is this allowed?
All right, let's dive into this. Alex brings up a tough question. How can a loving God allow such brutality in the world? He says we wouldn't swap places with a deer, but honestly, I wouldn't trade places with one even if it was having a great day. It's a human thing. We have a dignity that's unique, different from animals. But here's the twist. A deer's life is brutal, sure, but it's also beautiful. Imagine a sunlit glade, dewdrops on the grass, a tear on a deer's eyelash as it looks up to its mom. There's beauty in that. Is there worth in that beauty? Alex wants to boil everything down to utility, to pleasure and pain. But life isn't just about that. In the debate with Mike Jones, someone asked Alex about love. We love people for who they are, not just for what we get out of it, right? And Alex disagrees. He thinks love, like everything else, is about what you get out of it. It's an interesting perspective, but it really makes you question, what truly gives life meaning?
Yeah, I would just say that in my view, if something like the development of a relationship is good, it's good insofar as it brings people pleasure, right? This is kind of it's a very basic psychologically utilitarian point to make, but I think it roughly holds, which is that it doesn't make much sense to talk about intrinsic goodness of something like a relationship. I think what we mean to say is that we derive goods from having that relationship, right? My relationship with my friends, my relationship with my family, the reason I value those things is because of all the things that flow from them, because of the conversations that flow from them, the pleasure I get from that, from the feeling of safety and the feeling of friendship that I feel, the pleasure of that. But not that the thing itself, the act in isolation of just two people entering into a social contract by which they say they both like each other, intrinsically doesn't have any moral component to me.
So here's the thing. In the atheistic, especially utilitarian worldview, everything just gets boiled down to pleasure or pain. Simple as that. But John Lennox? Oh, he's handing Alex Akinor a real gift. The gift of beauty and bombs. Can you recognize the beauty with a capital B? Can you look at the bombs and call them evil for what they truly are? That's the question Lennox throws at us, and then he turns our eyes to Christ. And I think that's the real answer. Throughout history, humanity has tackled the problem of evil in two ways: karma or chaos. In the karmic view, suffering happens because of what you've done or what your ancestors did. It's the circle of life. Why expect anything different? Why think you deserve better? In karma, what goes around comes around. No injustice, just the way things are. But here's the kicker. If you accept karma, you don't really have a problem with evil. It's just the natural order. There's no mercy, only justice. Then there's chaos. The post-Christian answer. In a world of random, blind indifference, what's the problem? Nothing's wrong because everything's random. No evil, no good, just chaos. And once again, both karma and chaos fail to give us any real hope beyond evil. But here comes Christ. Christ steps into the darkest of valleys to take on our karma, our justice, our evil. He rises again to offer us hope. With Christ, we get three things you don't find in karma or chaos. We can truly appreciate the beauty of this world. Knowing there's goodness with a capital G, we can know we have a divine companion with us in our darkest moments, and we have a future beyond suffering. That's what Lennox gives to Alex, somebody done to us. Lennox isn't moving the goalposts, he's setting them. Finally, we've got a rule book, a game to play, a real goal. If what Lennox says is true, we have evil, we have good, and there's a purpose to everything. But if Dawkins, Fry, and others are right, there's nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And we've stopped having a problem with evil altogether. The real trick is making sure you've still got a problem with it.